From the lowest to the highest, from the furthest to the nearest, from the smallest of the smallest to the greatest of the greatest, yoga is about all of life, everything we do, all of existence. My name's James Bogue. Welcome to the Whole Life Yoga Podcast. Famously, the Bhagavad Gītā is set on the battlefield and in really the most stressful situation imaginable. The student in the Gita is called Arjuna. And Arjuna is a very experienced warrior. Normally, he likes going to fight. Archery is his art. It's his passion. It's what he's dedicated his life to. He wants to be the greatest warrior alive. He's very prideful about it. But the day that the Bhagavad Gītā is given, he goes to the battlefield and he asks his charioteer, who happens, happily for us, to be Krishna, to take him between the two sets of armies on the battlefield to see with whom he must deal in this terrible business of war. And who does he see? He sees in both sides of the battlefield, in both armies, all the people that normally he feels he's fighting for or fighting to protect. He sees his beloved teachers and gurus. He sees his brothers on his side. He sees his cousins on the other side. He sees uncles and benefactors and people whose knee he grew up on. And he sees the husbands, brothers, sons of the women that he feels it's his vow to protect. So what to do? What often human beings do when things seem chaotic, crazy, difficult to apprehend is we actually speed up. Or we just plow on the bandwagon that's already gained inertia. We careen on the inertia of the previously established habits, even though this juncture that we've come to is telling us, wait a minute, the rules you've lived by up to now, they're no longer adequate for the task at hand. The rules and norms that you have counted on, you can't count on them in this situation because they're not vast enough, they're not nuanced, adaptable enough to deal with this situation. So Arjuna finds himself in a situation on the battlefield, what he would normally do, which is go into battle full of confidence, knowing that he's doing the right thing. He can't just go on the inertia of his previously established habits. Things have come to a point where things have got to change. And I think this is happening globally. Just recently I've been contacted by people in different parts of the world who are feeling like the Bhagavad Gītā is happening around me. I see this conflict, some in the United States where there's all sorts of violence happening now. Some in parts of Europe where the economy is in such rapid decline that people wonder if they're going to be able to carry on doing the work that they've done up to now, whether they can feed their family. And certainly in my own life, I feel all sorts of challenge that seem to be only getting more and more accentuated in recent years. And this is why, there's thousands of reasons, but this is one of the reasons why I feel so grateful for the teachings of yoga and the teachings of the Gita especially, which I'll be working with in a course starting the last week of February, running for 12 weeks. A course on which you can gain an intimate acquaintance with this living, breathing, miracle text, a text that every time you look into it can show you something fresh that's of tremendous practical support. One of the most defining characteristic features of the Bhagavad Gītā is its extraordinary pragmatism. Many of Krishna's teachings, they are very akin to things that Marcus Aurelius might say in certain sections of his meditations. There's a similarity to Stoicism. There's a similarity to things you find in the Tao Te Ching. But the Gita, as well as being uber pragmatic, it's very vast, yet very distilled. And so it has this capacity, it contains this capacity to speak to so many different conundrums, so many different types of challenge, conflict, crisis in a very down-to-earth, relatable way. Once we penetrate the text and enter into relationship with it. One of the things that sometimes people find rather difficult about the Gita, they think, isn't yoga all about peace? Why is this text set on a battlefield? Who are all these old warriors? It seems like there's patriarchal story with these, men fighting amongst themselves and everybody else is suffering. People have got lots of reasons why they kind of just ignore the text or don't want to engage with it. But this, I would suggest, is a tragic and extreme case of throwing baby out with bathwater. There may be certain things about the setting within the Mahabharata, within that vast epic, that a person doesn't like, but it's no reason to discard the pragmatic, time-proven, robust teachings that the Gita conveys to anybody who's interested. The Gita is described as the distillation of all the Upanishads, and the Upanishads are being like cows. What? What's he talking about? This is the distillation of the Upanishads, and the Upanishads are like cows. Aren't Upanishads texts and cows are animals? Yes. Upanishads are texts. Upanishads is a beautiful name. It means to sit down near. And this is what it means to engage with teaching in the yoga tradition. It means to sit down near to the teaching. What does that mean? It means to get quiet and tune in and listen with all of our being. And this is what the world needs right now. Undoubtedly, there's all sorts of chaos. The politicians are ultra corrupt. The corporations are ultra corrupt. There's all sorts of exploitative practices, division and fragmentation that's running amok. There's a lot of corruption, but there's also been a corruption at the individual level. What do I mean? The corruption, the rupture of our connection to our own heart, to the pulsating intelligence within our very selves that connects us to the rest of life and to nature. And each of us, every moment of every day, we do have the opportunity and the possibility to recover more of that intrinsic gift of connection to all of life. But how are we going to do it? We have to be courageous if we're going to fight corruption. And how are we going to manifest this courage? Well, one of the prime ways we can actually do it in this world is to slow down. To slow down. Yes, the world is spiraling in all sorts of frightening directions. At the beginning of the Bhagavad Gītā, when Arjuna sees amassed around him all those who are near and dear to him, and he thinks nothing good can come of this war, I don't want to fight, what does he do? He tells his friend, his teacher, his charioteer, Krishna, I will not fight. Nayotsya, he says. Who does he say it to? Nayotsya iti Govindam. He says it to Krishna Govinda. Krishna, who is the protector of the cows. Now, symbolically, what does this mean? It means many things, but one of the things that it means is that Krishna is the one who can protect all of those parts of ourselves that are wont to roam in many different directions. In other words, Krishna is the Lord of the senses. Krishna is the intelligence that is deeper, subtler than all of the extraordinary intelligences of our sense and action powers that can get pulled hither and thither and consequently have us spiraling in all sorts of directions and misdirections. The cows. You set out your cows in the morning, they'll go roaming. Some will smell the nice herbs over there, some will smell the nice trees over there, some will go down to the river. They'll roam wherever their fancy takes them, wherever their senses take them. And our senses, our habitual preferences, they can pull us in so many different directions, but Krishna, Govinda, is the one that can bring them all together. So what happens at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gītā is that Arjuna, the person who acknowledges that he feels overwhelmed, that he feels confused, that he doesn't know what to do, he is a great warrior, and he demonstrates the courage that is required to be a great warrior, because instead of ploughing on in the habitual way of careening into war and using the things that he's always relied on up to now, for example, his great prowess with the bow and the arrow, and just doing the thing he's always done, he actually has the courage to break the pattern, to stop. He says, Nayotsya, I will not fight. And then what happens? It's so significant. And this is the thing about the Gita. There's so many teachings that are not explicit. It's not that Krishna says a teaching. Krishna says hundreds of practical teachings, but there are so many teachings that are just embedded in the way the text is delivered, the way the text is presented. And this is one of them. Nayodsya iti govindam tushnim babhuvaha. After Arjuna says, Nayotsya, I will not fight, iti Govindam, to Krishna, Govinda, the one, the protector, the leader of all the cows, the one that can bring together all those disparate parts of ourselves. Uktva, having said that, tushnim babuvaha. Then tushnim, Arjuna became tush, he became silent, he became quiet. And so this is the teaching that I would suggest I need to remember more fully. And I'm trying in my work to invite other people into the experience that can make it easier to actually embody that more fully, to slow down. And not fight against ourselves, not fight against our own deeper longings, our deeper interests, by careening into action when we feel torn or unsure. I know I've done that so many times in my life. Something doesn't quite add up, something doesn't feel right, but I feel some insecurity, and so I just plow on regardless, jumping onto the inertia, the bandwagon of the old familiar way, even though deep down I know that old familiar way is not going to serve me. But if I am going to make a change, then I have to be courageous enough to stop and slow down, to stop, look and listen, and really look around in a way that reaches beyond my habitual way of looking. And this is why it's so helpful for me, and I suggest it might be for many of you too. I invite you to join me on a course working with the Gita or working with any yoga text. As long as I'm alive, I will keep doing this. Is what I've dedicated my life to for the last 20 years and longer, really, because I was already teaching this stuff before I knew that it was yoga. When I first started teaching basketball at age 16, I wasn't just teaching basketball, I was communicating an ethos. I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, but that's what it was. Basketball was this object around which we could gather and all learn and grow together how to be more of our full selves, how to be more fully human, take responsibility, enjoy the moment, learn and grow together. Anyway, when we engage with a yoga text like the Bhagavad Gītā, we hold it up in front of ourselves and we hold it as a mirror to our own life, and it can show us where we're getting in our own way, where it might be most helpful to make a little shift, where it might be particularly helpful to reorient the way that we are relating to ourselves, to the people around us, and to life in general. But if we're going to do that, we have to slow down. And when we study a text and we dive into it, and we start to unpack the rich layers of suggested meaning that are embedded in its glorious poetry, this invites us into that slowed down space in which Krishna can speak to us. What do I mean when I say Krishna can speak to us? Who is Krishna? As I've said already, Krishna symbolizes that intelligence that is beyond that of our senses, that is beyond that of our ego, mind, identity. Krishna literally means dark. It also means that which draws things towards it. Symbolically, it can be understood as the black hole at the center of the universe, the source, the totality that everything longs to return to. But Krishna also means black, dark. It is mysterious. Arjuna means bright. It's the known. But the known, everything I've known up to now, is not enough. It doesn't feel like it can help me through this juncture I'm stuck in now. So I turn to the dark, to the unknown, to the mystery. I slow down. And I recognize that if I just stay attached to the known familiar, it's going to take me in a direction that is not really serving me. So can I slow down, stop, look in ways that reach beyond my habitual ways of looking, listen with the whole of my being, and then what might I discover? I too have a friend like Krishna by my side. Inside me, there is an angel on my shoulder. There's an angel inside my shoulder. If I move my shoulder in an unhelpful, unhealthy way, my shoulder will tell me itself, because there's an angel inside this body. There is so much divine intelligence, divine in the sense that it can help us see and understand, pulsating within this very bodily vehicle. But I will only be able to attune to it if I slow down long enough to penetrate through the layers of dispersed noise that have gripped the surface level of my awareness. And in the modern world, when we feel intimidated, frightened, unsure, it's so easy to lose ourselves in distraction at the surface level. If, however, we undertake the tapas, the discipline, the fire of yogic practice, of exploring how we can illumine our own life situation more deeply, then that sadhana, that path of practice, can help us see things that we were previously blinkered or even blind to. And when we study a text, it invites us to slow down. So if that appeals to you, please join my upcoming online course on the Gita. It'll start the last week of February. It'll run for 12 weeks with a break at Easter. And during those 12 weeks, what we will do is, the Gita is 700 verses, it's 18 chapters. I'm doing this course as part of a yoga education program at a yoga school in Switzerland. And so I'm working to a timetable that is part of that bigger program. And hence this course is 18 hours. 18 hours is not enough to study all the verses in depth. So what will we do? What we will do is we will tune in to what is sometimes called the Gita Sara. Gita Sara means the essence of the Gita. And many great acharyas, gurus, teachers over the ages, they have written some type of Gita Sara, some type of Gita Sangraha, some type of summary that describes the essence of the teachings. In the edition of the Bhagavad Gītā that's published at the Ramana Maharishi Ashram in Tiruvannamalai, for example, you can find at the end of that lovely book a selection of verses that Ramana considered to be the essence of the Gita. So with 18 hours to work in, we're not going to be able to look at all the verses of the Gita. But what we will do is we will look at some of the essential ones, especially the ones that are most pertinent to how to live a good, authentic, skillful existence in the reality of this whirling wonder of life. Now, one such teaching is the 14th verse and the 15th of chapter 2. Chapter 2 itself is considered a kind of summary of the whole text. And on this 12-week course, we will look at some verses from chapter 2 in some detail, just as we'll look at some verses from chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 13, 14, 18 at least. We'll probably look at least one or two verses from, maybe not every chapter, but certainly more than 12 of the chapters. But Gita chapter 2, its first 10 verses kind of summarize chapter 1, and it weaves the teaching of the Gita into the vaster fabric of the Mahabharata epic of which it's part. The Mahabharata epic, which is said to basically be a representation of the reality of life as it is, because it's said, if you find it in life, you find it in the Mahabharata. If it's not in the Mahabharata, you won't find it in life. And the Gita comes in the middle. It comes at this point where the protagonist, the human being, comes to a place where he or she recognizes the ways I've relied on up to now, they don't quite cut it. And we come to this point where we have to stop and we can look in ways that go beyond our habitual ways of looking. And then, when we acknowledge, I don't know what to do, Krishna starts teaching. So chapter 1 is the setting of getting to this point where I don't know what to do, I feel overwhelmed, and then Krishna starts teaching. And after those first 10 verses that kind of summarize chapter 1, the setting on the battlefield and Arjuna not knowing what to do, Krishna starts very, very beautifully by basically telling us about our essence. So this 14th verse says, Matras parashas dukonteya shitoshna sukadukkaraha agamapayano nityasthans titikshasvabharata. So very beautifully, Krishna addresses Arjuna and each of us so directly here. He calls him in the first line, Kaunteya, you who are your mother's son. Kaunteya refers to Arjuna as the son of Kunti, his mother. So when he uses this matronymic, he's basically telling us, you who've come out of a womb. In other words, he's speaking to each of us directly. We're all children of our mothers. We've all come out of the womb. And in the second line, he calls him Bharata. You were a child of this land. You were a child of this earth, of this soil, like each of us. When you're a child of nature, when you're part of nature, you're born. And like anything else that's born, what's going to happen? You're going to die. And in between those two great changes of birth and death, what are you going to experience? You're going to experience change. Krishna puts it beautifully. Matras parashas dukonteya. Hey, son of Kunti. Hey, you come out of a womb. When you're a human being, when you're part of nature, it's altogether natural and normal. when your sense powers come into contact with their objects, it will give rise to Shita and Ushna, to cool and warm, to cold and heat, and Shitoshna Sukha Dukkha, to Sukha and Dukkha, to agreeable situations and not so agreeable situations, to pleasure and pain, to gain and loss, and not just pleasure, pain, and hot and cold, but all the pairs of opposites that human birth is heir to. Joy, sorrow, growth, decay, all the pairs of opposites. When you're a human being, you can experience this whole vast range of different things that you can experience. But what do we know about all these different things? Agama, those things come. Apayanahan, they fleet away, they go. Anitya, they're not eternal. Tan, these things, titikshasva, bear them with steadiness. Be steady amidst them, Bharata, you who are a child of nature. Nature is a realm of change, but you are also a child of consciousness. You can be steady. And in the next verse, Yam hinavyatyantiyate purusham purushashava samadukkasakam tiram saha amritatvaya kalpade. Yam hinavyatyantiyate, one who does not shake and tremble amidst all this coming and going. Purusham purushashava, that person who excels amongst other people, that foremost of human beings. Samadukkasakam, the one who is wise, steady, illumined with clear awareness amidst all this coming and going. Saha, that person, amritatvaya kalpate, that person reveals, remembers, regains contact with his or her innate fitness to relish, to know the deathless essence that is actually pulsating at the core of our being. So in other words, what Krishna tells us is, when you're a human, you're a child of existence itself, and you're also a child of flesh and earth and the elements. And when you exist in the earthly manifest realm, when you're an animal, you're going to experience all of the types of experience that the human being has evolved to be able to experience. All these different flavors. And these flavors will be pleasant and unpleasant, will be agreeable and disagreeable. That's just the nature of nature. However, underlying all of this is something that does not change, something that is eternal, something that is vaster, greater, deeper, subtle than all the coming and going. And if you can be steady and clear amidst all the coming and going, then all this coming and going, the arena of bondage becomes the arena of liberation. All this coming and going, the arena of conflict, the battlefield, can be transformed into the dance hall, into the symphony of life. And so life is not to be spurned, denied, repressed, or rejected. No, life is to be wrestled with in such a way that we face with courage the challenge of reconciling all those things that can seem like opposing forces in such a way that we can actually draw forth their mutually complementary potential. And the Gita teaches us how to do this. But in order to do it, we have to slow down. And this is why study is so helpful. Study doesn't mean sitting and ticking in some boxes so you pass some tests. No, it means engaging with life. It is practice. What does practice mean? Learning from our mistakes, refining as we go. From the yogic perspective, in the yoga tradition, practice and study are one thing. They're not separate. So practicing yoga doesn't mean getting up at a particular time in the morning and standing on one's head for a particular length of time. That's not practice, that's part of a routine. Real practice means engaging with this active sense of deep, searching, ongoing, honest inquiry for a long, unbroken period of a whole lifetime or lifetimes. And it's yoga practice. What does yoga mean? Yoga means to join, to include, to reconcile, to harmonize. So yoga practice means working with all parts of the human vehicle. Not just the body, not just the breath, not just the intellect, not just the emotions, the whole system. And this is one of the reasons why studying the Shastras, studying the yoga texts, studying the traditional yoga teachings and stories is so helpful. Because the same challenges, the same pitfalls, the same negativities that have assailed human beings for millennia, they've been addressed comprehensively, pragmatically by this tradition. And that's why the teachings stay alive for thousands of years, because they are practical and they do work. But we have to work with them by countering the corruption that ruptures us from the innate, intrinsic, inbuilt capacity we have to deepen our connection to the intelligence of life itself that we are part of. That takes courage, and one of the ways that courage manifests in the modern world is by slowing down long enough to allow ourselves to notice where the habits we've relied on up to now might not be serving us, and giving ourselves the chance, the space, the time to instantiate new habits. And being part of a study group, a satsang group, engaging honestly with a mirror of a teaching text like the Bhagavad Gītā is a great way to facilitate that. So if this appeals to you at all, you can sign up for the next satsang course. It starts the last week of February, 18 hours in English and in French. So if you're bilingual, you can do it twice, and it'll come through in a different way in both sessions, I'm sure. And there's also the opportunity for people who are interested to learn to recite the Bhagavad Gītā. Again, we won't have time to learn to recite the whole text. Depending on the group that assembles, what people's preference is, and based on what they've done before in terms of recitation, that could either be learning a selection of verses, including the ones that we will study, in particular ones that we will zoom in on during the course of the 12-week sessions, or we could take a particular chapter. But I think we'll probably just focus on verses that we're going to really explore, and we'll kind of make our own Gita Sara. Because once you start to be able to recite, there's only 2 meters in the Gita, the Anushtub meter and the Trishtub meter. So once you get familiar with them, you'll be empowered to then be able to take on recitation of the whole text with more confidence. So, welcome. Please sign up. Please be courageous. Please remember, and I'm speaking to myself as much as anybody else, of course, we teach what we need to learn. But please remember that the world's always been an amazing place. There's always been this craziness and this change. And we do have resources available to us to help steady us through times of challenge. If you'd like to dive in to the yogic resources to do that with me, very happy to see you on the course. If you like this type of content, please do share it with other people who might be interested. I think that's all for today. Namaste.